Okay, so now we're going to talk about something that's a little more challenging. I think I've said everything that I want to say about the first two parts of this. You understand how the size of the labor force is calculated. You understand the working age population, the labor force survey and how that's used in order to categorize people and to calculate the unemployment rate. Calculate the labor force participation rate, and any of the derivative calculations like the percentage of employed of the working age population. We also talked about the four types of unemployment. We have frictional and structural, which basically are said to form the natural rate of employment or the natural rate of unemployment. And then we have our cyclical, which is the ups and downs of the market. And then we have our seasonal. We try to remove the seasonal unemployment and consider that to be just, the seasons will change, those things will happen. Frictional and structural, we try to consider the natural rate of unemployment. So the natural rate of the full employment is not full employment is 100% less than natural rate of unemployment, frictional and structural, and then you have your cyclical, which is going to change over time with the instability of our economic system. Um, so now the book wants to talk a little bit about explaining unemployment, and this is where people are going to definitely have disagreements. Um, now, now it does say that governments, and this is one of the places where I kind of divert from this classical economics, but we're going to try and just hold our nose and look at these explanations that are given. So your book goes into some length to talk about how government policies can actually exacerbate some of the problems with frictional and structural unemployment, or prolong them. And they give the example that employment insurance, we call it employment insurance now. I remember when they changed the name from unemployment insurance to employment insurance to try and give it a different flavor. But really what that is that you can we as workers pay into an insurance plan, which if we ever happen to find ourselves frictionally or structurally unemployed, then we may be able to go and collect on this insurance policy and take approximately half of what we were making and try to eke out some survival on that while we go out and put ourselves through, as I said before, bearing the cost of trying to find ourselves another place within the labor force. So there are some who would say that the very fact that we even have that program is something that exacerbates the frictional or structural unemployment, allows people to languish in being unemployed longer, and gives them less incentive to go and find work because it's not do or die, because we're not forcing them to starve in the streets. As a result of that, that would be a real incentive. Then people would magically find themselves employed. But no, because we have an unemployment insurance system, a bit of a safety net so that you don't have to fall into absolute starvation. If you're lucky enough to meet the criteria of this insurance program that you've paid into all your working life, and you haven't left your job voluntarily, if you leave your job voluntarily, you can't even collect this unemployment insurance. Employment insurance. But that's supposed to be one of the reasons for, or one of the government policies that it claims will exacerbate or extend people's periods of frictional or structural unemployment. You'd almost think that our society's human resources might wind up being better deployed if people could voluntarily withdraw from the labor force, from a situation that doesn't actually fit them, and get into something that was the highest, best use of their talents, and not have to starve and bear the entire cost in the process. You might think that as a society we might benefit because more of people's strengths would be brought out because they would have those opportunities to choose. But no, we have developed a system that's designed to clamp down on that because of this philosophy that a generous safety net will, or the more generous your safety net, the more unemployment you're actually going to create. So your authors make some attempt to make that argument. They also say that minimum wage laws will take us above what is considered the market clearing wage. And when you read this market clearing wage term, they are literally doing this. They're taking you and placing you in this. Our old friend from chapter 3 is our supply and demand table. And so what they're saying is, here's your supply of labor and here's your demand for labor, right? So this supply is your workers, right? The suppliers of labor. You go out and you supply your labor, as we looked at in our circular flow diagram, household supply labor to, through factor markets, and then this is the employers. Employers are the demanders of labor, right? So when they refer to a market clearing wage, what they're saying is that there is a price which will yield this quantity, and our unemployment are all these people who are willing and able to supply labor who are not included. So their standards are just too high. The thing is, if you starve them out long enough, their standards will come down, and then their standards are here, and they're at this impossible point right over here. But in any case, this is what they're talking about when they say there's a market clearing wage. So then what we're supposed to look at there is we're supposed to say, okay, well, let's leave this negotiation entirely to the market. So you go out and you sell yourself for as much as you possibly can. You try to get the highest price you can for your labor. And these employers are, following the law of demand. They will demand more as the price goes down, and you will supply more as the price goes up. If magically the price goes up in the market, you'll be running out there to get a job because people are suddenly willing to pay more. So this is what they're trying to say, right? The problem I have with this is that these suppliers don't have a choice, because if they want to function in any other market as demanders of goods, they better supply their labor. So they're kind of supplying under duress. But in any case, the point is that they're trying to say that there is a market clearing wage, right? And when they say that, okay, well, we're going to minimum wage laws. So when the government, and we're supposed to envision this, like, okay, so I guess this is for minimum wage labor. Minimum wage labor. If we're going to look at a market supply and demand curve, right? So they're saying that if you raise what the minimum wage does, naturally assuming that the minimum wage is going to be above the market clearing wage, which is what they say here, well, that's going to create, what we have here is a surplus, our good old friend surplus, which we identified in our supply and demand. And what is a surplus of labor? What's another word for that? That a surplus of labor is unemployment. So they're trying to say that if you raise the minimum wage, then these cats are going to want less than what is supplied. because if you raise the minimum wage to something that is actually a living wage, all of a sudden people are going to be running around trying to find places to work, and nobody's going to employ them because suddenly there will be no more work to be done, right? So that's what they're trying to say, is that the minimum wage laws contribute. It's the same thing that they're trying to say about labor unions too, right? One thing that, the labor movement, when the labor movement was at its strongest, they've said here that 15.3% of workers are in a union. I've heard much lower estimates, but I'll go with what they've got here. 15.3% are part of a union. That doesn't say whether their union is active or strong or whatever, but they are just part of a union in the private sector. In the public sector, it's always higher. There's a teachers union, public service employees union, which still, has remained reasonably strong. But in the private sector, it's quite a bit lower. So what happens there with labor unions is that there's a philosophy of collective bargaining. So one employee doesn't have to go into the office and say, oh, well, please, I can't afford to feed my family, so can I please have a raise? Or, when you make me stick my hand into that hot boiling water, it scalds my skin, and I can't do that. Like it takes it out of the hands of that one little employee to negotiate with the much stronger force of the company, and brings those people together so that they can bargain collectively for their mutual benefit, and also so that they can step forward and say, it is the labor in this organization that creates the product that you sell in order to make a profit. So therefore, we would like a larger share of the profit that creates. So to paint this as a picture of just, free, as if labor is just a commodity being supplied to the market like any other, I always take exception to that example. But in any case, so they try to say here that when you drive the general, and if you look at labor markets in this way, there is an incentive to drive, if you have a higher labor force participation rate, what did we look at in the last one? The labor force participation rate is everyone who either has a job or is willing to take a job or looking for work. So that would be your suppliers. So if we have a higher labor force participation rate, as they pointed out since the 1970s, more women coming into the market, then you've got your supply curve moving out. What did we say before about supply? One of the things that makes the supply curve move is more suppliers involved in that market. So we've got our supply curve moving out to supply one, and we're going to have a new equilibrium. We're going to have more people hired at lower wages, right? So that's naturally what's supposed to happen. As we have more people in the workforce, this is supposed to go down. So we'll have more and more people working, but at lower and lower wages. Now, operating on that philosophy, what do we see now? We see more and more people working for lower and lower wages. We see more and more households where people have more than one job in order to support their household. Used to be one person in a household, regardless of gender, one person in the household could go out, get a job, function, raise a family. Maybe we could have shifted the gender balance on that and made it, more women, less men, all genders participating equally. I don't mean that. What I mean is, it used to be possible for one person to make a household work, but we don't see that as being the most common example anymore. And that may be because of this downward pressure on wages, but I don't think it's just coming from the market. I don't think it's coming from something as if this market were just something natural applying downward pressure to wages. You know, I mean, naturally, we do have more people entering. You know, if our population is expanding, well, then more of those people are going to get to be 15. Mind you, we have a smaller cohort coming up, smaller and smaller cohorts coming up all the time, but people tend to live a little bit longer, and because of our broken economic system, they tend to work a lot longer too. How many times do you know, now we've got at the minimum wage, we've got people we never had before competing for those jobs. It used to be those were first jobs for people just, you know, in high school, just getting out, maybe making their way through college or whatever it happened to be. But now you know, people who can't afford to retire are now competing for those minimum wage jobs again, and whatever. So we certainly do have an exceeding supply of labor, and there is downward pressure on that. So government intercedes in order to set it at a particular standard. But I don't know that, you know, that's what's causing the unemployment. You know, and then it talks about efficiency wages, you know, firms paying higher, offering higher wages in order to attract talent, you know, or to increase the efficiency of their employees. So, you know, naturally, right in here, what we're saying with this concept of efficiency wages is that we're saying that the science would tell us that people respond to economic incentives. People, you know, right from chapter 1, people respond to economic incentives. People who are working to create a profit generally feel much better about themselves and become more productive when a share of that profit comes their way. You know, that's not really the reality for most workers now. And that to me is a product of the top-down way in which we've designed our systems. And this economic philosophy is designed to support that. So that's why we find these explanations of unemployment in our book. But I'm going to tell you my feeling is that that the unemployment this is actively fomented because we put everything in the hands of the profit system, and efficiency is supposed to be, you know, labor efficiency is the more we can get out of a single worker at a time. So, you know, machines were originally designed to just make workers be able to produce more per worker. So, you know, all of our technology, lots of human ingenuity has gone into building bigger and better ways to produce more with the same number of labor resources. But think about our circular flow diagram again. You know, how is that really going to work? We have bigger problems than just unemployment and inflation. We're going to continue to examine those in this chapter, but make no mistake, we have bigger problems than that, because if we just continue to exert downward pressure on wages, well, those same wages are what go in our circular flow back into those very firms themselves. So we're creating a self-perpetuating cycle, which is just basically a race to the bottom. And I've said before, if we hadn't been pumping it up with consumer credit, we would be in much worse shape now. So whenever that credit ends is where we're going to really start experiencing some significant problems. Anyway, so I just wanted to really cover those reasons that are given in the book and just wake you up to some different ways of thinking about them. I hope all this is clear. Certainly reach out if you have more questions about the chapter. And for those of you that I see live, I will see you in class as well.